This episode of Budget MTG Decks is sponsored by TCG Player, the best place to buy your cards in the US. Welcome to Budget MTG Decks. All the cards you see in our videos are $1 or less, with exception of the Commander cards. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click the bell icon to be notified when a new video comes out. Hi, welcome to Budget MTG Decks. I'm David.
And I'm Jasper, and today we're going to be talking about a fun and effective commander deck you can build without breaking the bank. And today we have a ramp commander in the form of Nikya of the Old Ways. Now for 3, a red and a green, we have a 5/5 legendary creature Centaur Druid. She says we can't cast non-creature spells, but we don't need those. And whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type to your mana pool.
Exactly. So the strategy of this deck is basic Gruul. We want to play loads of creatures. We can't really play anything else. We're playing loads of creatures. We're getting loads of mana. We're pumping that into either making lots of tokens or pumping our creatures. Then we're swinging in and we're crushing our opponents. So essentially 3 strategies that we're going to be doing in this deck. It's going to be play loads of lands, produce loads of mana, and use the mana sinks and beaters to finish our opponents.
Yeah, so we're basically going to crush our opponents, see them driven before us, and hear the lamentations of their women.
And that is what is best in life. And it's actually, for all that goodness, it's actually not that expensive, right?
Yeah, no, the commander's only 27 cents the rest of right now, and the rest of the deck is about $28, so for less than $30, you can have a whole new commander deck.
Pretty sweet. All right, let's have a look at the deck list, grouped by category. So we're going to start with the synergy cards, and these are the cards that work really well together. These are all the cards that epitomize what the deck wants to do. And we divided those into 3 categories. We've got the token generators, we've got the pump cards, and the cards that give us our creatures special abilities. We're going to start with the token cards. We've got Wolfbriar Elemental, Ant Queen, and Verdaloth the Ancient, and these are all cards that we can pump all our excess mana into to create loads of awesome tokens.
And then of course we have a lot of creatures that pump those tokens and all other creatures. So we have Creeper Hulk, we have Endray's Forerunners, and we have Decimator of the Provinces. Now Creeper Hulk lets us turn a single creature into a 5/5 creature with trample, and both Endray's Forerunners and Decimator's Provinces give a massive buff to our whole army, plus it gives them trample, so it really allows us to push through that big damage.
Exactly, and let us know in the comments below whether Endray's Forerunners or Decimator of Provinces should get the medal for Budget Craterhoof Behemoth. Then we have some of the cards that give abilities. First we have Archetype of Aggression, Ogre Battle Driver, and Yeva Nature's Herald. Now the first card gives our creatures trample and makes sure our opponent's creatures don't have trample. Ogre Battle Driver pumps our creatures and gives them haste. And Yeva Nature's Herald allows us to play our green creatures with flash, which is nice to have some nice little surprises when people are attacking us.
Yeah. Then we have some creatures with very synergistic abilities with our deck. We have Captivating Crew, Bloodshot Cyclops, and Ruriktar the Unbowed. Now first of all, Captivating Crew is a repeatable steal of our opponent's creatures until end of turn. It's a very good way to dump our mana, get rid of pesky blockers. And then if you also have Bloodshot Cyclops, you can throw those creatures back in their face, or just throw one of your own oversized creatures to finish an opponent off. And then finally you have Ruriktar. It's a very powerful creature that punishes people for playing non-creature spells, which we don't do, so it's very one-sided in this deck.
Exactly, so if we're not playing non-creature spells, other people shouldn't be doing that either. Yeah. That is it for the synergy cards. Let's have a look at the protection cards.
Yeah. Now next up we have a set of creatures that allows us to protect our board from various types of removal. First off we have some protection against targeted removal in the form of Goblin Chirurgeon, Rushwood Herbalist, and Temur Sabertooth. Now the Chirurgeon is very straightforward. Sacrifice a Goblin, regenerate target creature, which is usually just a Chirurgeon itself. Then the Herbalist is a spell shaper, so you pay, you tap, you discard a card, and you regenerate target creature. It's reusable. And then finally Temur Sabertooth. For 2 mana we can return a creature to our hands to make the Sabertooth indestructible end of turn, and of course also recycle and enter the battlefield effects.
Very sweet. Then we got some cards that help protect us against board wipes. We got Whisperwood Elemental and Soul of New Phyrexia. Whisperwood Elemental makes sure that if somebody wipes the board, then for all our non-token creatures we're going to be manifesting a card, so we're going to get 2/2 manifested creatures for that, which we can of course pay the mana cost, flip them over again. And Soul of New Phyrexia allows us to pump mana into it and then make all our permanents indestructible, which is super nice. And it's a 6/6 trampler as well, so that's nothing to sniff at by itself.
Then finally you have 2 creatures who protect specifically against counter magic, Gaia's Herald and Spellbreaker Behemoth. Gaia's Herald protects all creatures from counter magic, says creature spells can't be countered. The Spellbreaker Behemoth says that it itself can't be countered, and that creatures with power 5 or greater can't be countered, which of course we have a lot of in this deck.
Absolutely. That is it for the protection cards. Let's have a look at the control cards. We divided the control cards into 3 categories, those that allow us to deal with creatures, those that allow us to deal with non-creatures, and actually just the general board wipe cards. We're going to start with the targeted creature removal, and that is Ulvenwald Tracker and Pelucranos World Eater. Ulvenwald Tracker allows us every single turn to make sure that one of our creatures fight with somebody else's creatures, and Pelucranos one time can become monstrous, and then it's going to deal damage to any number of creatures equal to the X in the monstrosity, but it's also going to receive damage from the creatures that it damages, which you might think, okay, it's going to die very easily, but we are going to pump a lot of mana into it. It's going to be huge. It'll probably survive, and it'll take a lot of creatures down with it as well.
Yeah. Then next up we have Jaya Ballard, the Task Mage, Jiwari, the Earth Aflame, and Tyrant's Familiar. Now Jaya Ballard is a legendary spell shaper. She comes with 3 different spells, one that gets rid of blue permanents, one that deals 3 damage to a creature or player, and one that deals 6 damage to each creature and each player, so she's a walking board wipe when we need her to be. Then next up we have Jiwari, the Earth Aflame. It's a bit of an odd creature. When it's on the battlefield we can tap it to basically cast Fireball on a creature without flying, but we can also channel it. That means casting it from our hand, and then pay mana to deal X damage to each creature without flying. And then finally we have Tyrant's Familiar. It's a dragon, flying, haste, hits very hard, but it also has Lieutenant, so if we control our commander and a Tyrant's Familiar, then whenever it attacks it deals 7 damage to target creature defending player controls.
Yeah, when this thing comes in, it always gets rid of the most threatened thing on the battlefield. It is so awesome. Then we move on to the non-creature removal. We've got Reclamation Sage, Acidic Slime, and Terastodon. Reclamation Sage can hit artifacts or enchantments. Acidic Slimes can also hit lands on top of that, and Terastodons can also hit planeswalkers on top of that. On the downside, of course, Terastodon will be giving the owner of the permanents that we've removed, will give them a 3/3 elephant, but you know, who cares about
3/3
that?
elephant compared to our creatures.
Exactly, it's going to be
speed
pathetic.
bump.
Pathetic. All right.
And then finally we have Orcish Settlers. We can pay double X and red and tap it to sacrifice and destroy X target lands. Now a lot of players may say mass land destruction is not fun, but of course there's always pesky lands around like Maze of Ith, so it's good to have a card like this to deal with that.
Yeah, and usually this card is so inefficient, it's just so bad. I mean, it doesn't have haste, you know, it's just... you got to put in so much mana to even destroy one land. It's really quite... You can't do it repeatedly because you got to sacrifice the Orcish Settlers. It's just really a pathetic card. However, in this deck, with the sheer amount of mana we put in here, with ways of giving it haste, it is actually kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
So people are never expecting this. And the art is amazing, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Plus it's a good way to get rid of excess friends.
That's true. Then we go on to the board wipe cards. We've got Bloodfire Kavu and Caldera Hellion. The Bloodfire Kavu can come in, we can keep it around and then sacrifice it for 1 mana later to deal 2 damage to each creature. 2 damage doesn't really do a lot to our creatures anyway, or we can just, you know, pay 5 mana and just do the board wipe in that turn. And the Caldera Hellion does 3 damage when it comes in, but the cool thing is that we can't eat a couple of our creatures up to make sure that it's big enough so it doesn't die to its own board wipe.
Yeah, and the creatures we eat usually would have died anyway.
Exactly.
And next up we have Harbinger of the Hunt and Steel Hellkite. Harbinger of the Hunt basically says for 3 mana we can deal 1 damage to each creature with flying or each creature without flying. So it's a good mana sink. And then Steel Hellkite, it's a Commander All-Star. It does have to connect, but we can pay X and then destroy all non-land permanents with converted mana cost X, so it can get rid of a lot of pesky permanents.
Yeah, and remember that if you are playing against a token player, you can pay 0 and then you kill all their tokens.
And their hopes and dreams.
Also, that is not to be underestimated. Yeah. That is it for the control cards. Let's have a look at the card advantage cards.
So now let's take a look at our card advantage cards. These are the cards that make sure we always have a handful of creatures to throw at our opponents. Now we've divided these into 3 categories. First we have the creatures that draw us cards. Then we have the recursion creatures, creatures that get stuff back from our graveyard to throw at our opponents again. And finally we have some tutors to make sure that we always hold in the right cards. Now for the draw, first up we have Runic Armasaur and Soul of the Harvest. Runic Armasaur is a very recent addition from M19. It basically says whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature or land that's not a mana ability, so it doesn't add mana to the mana pool, you draw a card, which is of course very nice in Commander because you have a lot of opponents that play a lot of stuff like fetch lands that also trigger Runic Armasaur, so it's always going to be filling our hand, and it's a very decent blocker for the amount of money you pay for it. And then Soul of the Harvest is 6/6 trample, so it's a very beefy beater that also gives us more creatures every time we play a creature.
Yeah, it's important to remember one small detail is that a mana ability is a mana ability when it produces mana, except if it produces mana when you targeted something. such as Deathrite Shaman, for example, then it's not a mana ability. But it's most of the time, it's a very easy, just say if it produces mana, then it's a mana ability.
Yeah.
Then we have a Garruk's Pack Leader and Ulvenwald Observer. Both these cards are going to be drawing us cards based on the first cards because of the power, and the second one because of the toughness, and the first one when it enters, and the second one when it dies. But yeah, pretty much it looks at big creatures, and we're going to be drawing cards out of that. Garruk's Companion, of course, nice. It keeps the flow going when we're playing them, and Ulvenwald Observer is kind of insurance for when people want to board wipe us.
Yeah, we get them coming and going. Then next up we have two very big draw engines. We have Garruk's Horde, and we have Regal Force. Now Garruk's Horde basically says you play with the top card of your library revealed, and when it's a creature you may play it. Of course, more than half of our deck is creatures, so it's very relevant, and it's a 7/7 trampler itself. And then Regal Force says whenever it enters the battlefield, you draw a card for each green creature you control, which is hopefully lots.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have we move on to the recursion cards. We've got Paleoloth, Deadwood Treefolk, and Artisan of Kozilek. The first one triggers whenever a creature with power 5 or greater comes into play out of control. We're going to get a creature back from our graveyard back to our hand. So that's nice because, as I said, when they're coming, bam, we're playing them. We're getting creatures back from our graveyard. A Deadwood Treefolk, when it comes in, we're going to get a card, a creature card, sorry, not any card, a creature card back, and it's got Vanishing, which means after 3 turns it's going to die, and then we're going to do it again. An Artisan of Kozilek, this thing is massive, very expensive, not relevant for this deck because we got loads of mana, comes in, and we're going to play a creature directly from the graveyard onto the battlefield. And of course it's important to remember this is when you cast it, so if we would have another way to play it directly, it wouldn't trigger. But it's very important to remember that not only is it the 10/9, but also it's got Annihilator 2, which is such a terrible mechanic, actually. It's absolutely brutal.
Depends on which end of it you're.
That is absolutely true. On our side, we are loving it.
Yeah. Now next up we have some tutor spells. We have Fierce Empath, Monvuli Beast Tracker, and Brutalizer Exarch. Now Fierce Empath, it searches for a creature with converted mana cost 6 or greater, which we happen to have a lot of. Monvuli Beast Tracker searches based on a lot of abilities commonly associated with the green of the color pie, so stuff like Trample, Death Touch, Reach. And Brutalizer Exarch, when it enters the battlefield, you either search for a creature card put on top, or you put a non-creature permanent on the bottom of the opponent's library. Now the Monvuli Beast Tracker is especially nice. We have a few very relevant targets. We have of course Acidic Slime, which you can find after Death Touch, and we have Soul of the Harvest for the draw, which you can find after Trample, and Decimator of Provinces, which also has Trample, which allows us to close out the game.
Oh yeah, these are exactly later, especially later on in the game, where you just need that one card to get rid of something or to push through. It gets you exactly what you need. That is it for the card advantage cards. Let's have a look at the ramp cards. We divided the ramp cards into 4 categories, and that is the mana dorks, the land fetchers, the land untappers, and the mana doublers. We're going to start with the mana dorks. We've got Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, Beast Caller Savant, and Zhur-Taa Druid. All of these guys are just tiny little 1/1s that tap for mana.
Yeah, and of course the Beast Caller Savant does have the restriction you can only pay the mana for creature spells, but we don't really care about that. And of course the extra nice part is that it has haste built in.
Yeah, exactly.
Then next up we have Radha, Heir to Keld, and then Radha after she made a promotion, Grand Warlord Radha. And Radha, Heir to Keld, adds 2 red mana when she attacks, which you can only use during the combat step, sadly, or it taps for a green. But Grand Warlord Radha has haste, and it adds a combination of red or green equal to the number of creatures you attack with. So that means you can just, if you have a haste enabler, you can dump a lot of stuff on the board, swing, then end up with a lot of mana and dump even more on the board when your opponent thinks it's safe.
Yeah, and this one you don't have to use in the combat phase because it doesn't empty from your mana pool, which is pretty sweet. Yeah. Then we have the land fetchers. These are going to be the cards that are going to be getting us more lands from our library, preferably onto the battlefield. We've got Diligent Farmhand and Dawn Treader Elk. Both of these, they come in and then we can sacrifice them to go search for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Yeah.
Now next up we have mana fetchers. First we have Wood Elves, Farhaven Elf, Yavimaya Granger, and Realm Seekers. Now Wood Elves, Farhaven Elf, they're both classic ramp cards. Yavimaya Granger is a 3 mana 2/2 that does pretty much the same, but it does have Echo, so you might have to pay it again, but of course we've got mana to waste, so usually we can pay the Echo cost if we need it. And then Realm Seekers is something special. It's 6 mana, it's a 0/0, but it gets a +1/+1 counter for each card in all players' hands, so it comes in, it can easily be 15, 20, 20. something ridiculous like that. And then for 3 mana we can remove a counter to search for land, so we have a lot of mana to sink. We can basically strip our entire deck of land and make our opponents cry.
Absolutely. And then we go to the land untappers. We've got Arbor Elf, Voyaging Sager, Croatian Restorer, and Magus of the Candelabra. Arbor Elf, and Voyaging Satyr are very basic. They just untap 1 land. Croatian Restorer also does that normally, but when we've got thresholds, when we've got 7 or more cards in our graveyard, we can actually untap 3 target lands, which of course when our commander's up there or some of our mana doublers is going to be absolutely insane. And then the even more insane card, Magus of the Candelabra, pay X, tap, untap X target lands. That means essentially we can just double our mana with this card when we've got the mana doubler, and then tripler when we got another one. And if we got the last one, then we can have quadruple our mana.
Yeah, and of course it's always fun to have a creature that has an ability that's shared with an artifact from Antiquities that's worth a few $1,000s.
Exactly. This one is under $1.
So finally we have the mana doublers. We have Keeper of Progenitus and Zurta Ancient. Now, Keeper of Progenitus basically adds 1 extra mana whenever a player taps a mountain, a forest, or plains, and Zurta Ancient adds 1 mana whenever someone taps a land. Now, of course, the important thing to keep in mind is that it does double the mana that our opponents produce as well. Nikya is one-sided, these ones aren't. But of course, Keeper of Progenitus, it ties to specific lands, which we play a lot of, and hopefully our opponents don't. So it's not as one-sided, and of course you can always use this to make friends. So don't attack me, you get a lot of extra mana from me.
Yeah, and I like the Zurta Ancient, even if people don't really like the extra mana. I mean, who doesn't? It's still 7/5, which you are going to be swinging at your opponents with, dealing every time either killing something or dealing tons of damage. Should also, they have to get rid of it, or you're getting lots of benefit from that. Absolutely. All right, that is it for the Ram cards. Let's have a look at the lands.
Now let's take a look at the land. We've divided these into 12 mountains, 20 forests, and 5 non-basic lands. Now for our non-basic lands we have the Gruul Guildgate, Kazandu Refuge, Rugged Highlands, Game Trail, and Spinerock Knoll. Now the Guildgate, the Refuge, and the Highlands, they all come into play tapped. 2 of those do give us 1 life. The Game Trail can be very easily played in untapped, which is very rare in a budget card, but hey, who are we to complain? And then Spinerock Knoll, it's land that comes in tapped, it only produces red, but it is Hideaway, which means that you can look at the top 4 cards, exile 1 of them under it, then you can play it when the condition is met. In this case, opponent has to have lost 7 life, and of course we're going to be smashing our opponent so hard so that it won't be a problem.
Exactly. That is it for the lands. Let's have a look at an example starting hand.
Yeah.
So here we have 2 examples of starting hands. As you can see, we start off with at least 3 lands. We've got a mana dork in both examples. We've got a way that we can double our mana or use our mana more efficiently with our commander on the battlefield, such as with the Magus of the Candelabra. We've got a mana sink in the form of Ant Queen in the first hand, or Creeper Hulk in the second hand. And we have also a way to draw us more cards in the form of Soul of the Harvest in the top hand and Runic Armasaur. And like this, with these kind of example hands, we can make sure that we start the game off nicely. We've got something to do with our mana. We've got a way of getting more mana out there, and we've got a way of keeping our hands filled. All right, that's it for the example of the starting hands. Let's have a look at some non-budget upgrades.
Now let's take a look at some cards that you might be able to replace with some non-budget variations to make your deck even more effective.
Exactly, and if you have any ideas for other non-budget upgrades that would be great in this deck, don't forget to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'm David.
And I'm Jasper.
And this was Budget MTG Decks. Find all the cards discussed in this video in the description below. Also, show you're a fan of the channel by rocking this awesome Budget MTG Decks merchandise. This show was made possible by the support of our loyal patrons. Head on over to patreon.com/budgetmtgdecks and donate as little as $1 per month.